My daughter-in-law snatched my purse from my lap, laughing. What's even in here? A few old receipts? She thought it was funny, until she realized what I'd been carrying all along. The deed to the house she was trying to claim. So I did what any mother-in-law would do. I showed her exactly what she'd never touch, my home, my legacy, and I wasn't about to let her take it. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. The air inside the Miller dining room was thick with roasted ham, clinking silverware, and something sharper, humiliation in slow simmer. The table gleamed under the glow of a new chandelier Vanessa had insisted on installing. Adds value, she'd said. It was the kind of brightness that cast shadows in all the wrong places. Edith placed her purse gently beside her chair, the same way she had for decades. Small, square, and worn at the corners, it matched nothing in Vanessa's designer-drenched world, but it held her life. Documents, records, keys, receipts, her entire sense of control zipped into leather. Dinner had barely begun when Vanessa leaned across the table with a wine-fueled smirk. "What's even in here, Edith?" she said, already grabbing the purse. "Mints? Coupons from 2009? She pulled it into her lap, popped it open without permission, and held it high like a prize. Kyle chuckled, awkward and shallow. "Come on, Van." Clara froze mid-bite. Her eyes snapped to her grandmother, then to her mother. "Mom, don't—" But Vanessa was already digging. "Let's see. Oh, a check register. And what's this? A folded newspaper clipping? Good grief, Edith. Is this a grocery list from Thanksgiving?" Edith didn't flinch. Her hands remained in her lap, her back rigid. The room spun a little, not from wine, but from the sting of being handled like clutter in her own home. Vanessa tossed the purse back like a prop in a skit. "Nothing worth stealing," she said, loud enough to command attention. Didn't realize it was just grandma dust and boredom. Edith reached down, retrieved the purse without a word, and set it back upright beside her. She zipped it shut, slowly, tightly, and resumed buttering her roll as if the conversation had never happened. Clara's fork hit her plate with a metallic clink. "That was unnecessary," Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Oh, lighten up." She didn't say anything. She shouldn't have to, Clara snapped. Kyle looked away. He always did when things got messy. The rest of dinner passed in false cheer. Talk of Clara's college applications, the weather, the new landscaping project Vanessa was micromanaging. Anything but what had just happened. After dessert, Edith quietly excused herself. On the porch, night had fallen cool and clean. Across the street, Norma Atkins was trimming her hedges by porch light, still wearing gardening gloves and her signature blue visor. "She really did it this time, didn't she?" Norma said, without looking up. Edith exhaled slowly, the scent of vanilla pie still on her blouse. "She went through my purse." "That purse," Norma said, standing upright, "has more spine in it than most people's entire bodies. Don't let her treat it like a joke." "I didn't want to cause a scene," Edith said softly. "Scene's already caused. Next time, cause a solution." Later, as the house settled into silence, Edith moved through her hallway with practiced quiet. The purse was back in its usual place, hung on the inside doorknob of her bedroom closet. She unzipped it, checked its contents like muscle memory: deed copy, health proxy, savings statements, birth certificate, insurance policy, and a thin folder marked property. Everything still there, everything still hers. She didn't sleep easily that night. At 2:11 a.m., she got up for water. On her way to the kitchen, voices floated from the front yard just beyond the hedges. Kyle and Vanessa were standing near their SUV, unaware the windows were open. "I'm just saying," Vanessa whispered. "Once she's gone, we'll flip the house. Fresh paint, rip up the carpet. Easy profit." Kyle's voice was quieter. "She hasn't said anything about signing it over." "She will," Vanessa said, jingling the keys. "Old women don't hold on forever." Edith stood frozen in the hallway. Her glass of water trembled in her hand. light from the street lamp slicing through the blinds like a blade. She didn't cry. She didn't rage. She walked back to her room, sat at her desk, and pulled a fresh manila envelope from the drawer. On the tab, she wrote one word in clean blue ink: Vanessa. The envelope looked like any other, white, official, stamped from the county auditor's office. Edith had opened it over her morning coffee, expecting another routine notice about property valuation. What she found made her stomach tighten like a fist. There, printed in stark black letters on the top right corner of the tax document, was a line she had never seen before. Co-owner, Kyle A. Miller. Her breath hitched. She read it again, and again. She hadn't signed anything. Not a deed amendment, not a survivorship clause, nothing. The house had been in her name since Harold passed. She knew because she'd filed the paperwork herself after the funeral, alone, with shaking hands and a pen that leaked ink. The coffee had gone cold in her cup before she moved. She stood, walked straight to her bedroom closet, and retrieved the purse. With precise fingers, she folded the notice and tucked it into the front compartment, right behind her utility bills and directly ahead of her passport. It made a new layer in the living archive she carried everywhere. Clara showed up later that morning to borrow colored pencils from the basement. Her portfolio deadline was looming. Edith waited until they were alone in the kitchen, then laid the tax notice on the table. Clara frowned. Wait, why is Dad listed as co-owner? I was hoping you'd tell me, Clara hesitated. Mom said that Dad had filed something with the county to make things easier down the line, for when you know, so there wouldn't be court stuff, I see. Edith's voice was calm, but her fingers closed around the paper like it might float away if she didn't anchor it. Did she mention that to me before signing my house away? No, Clara whispered. She told Dad not to, I think. Said you'd overreact. Her voice lowered further. She said it's better to just get it done. Edith folded the document again, slower this time. When someone hides a signature, it's because they know you won't give it. She placed it carefully back into the purse and zipped it shut. That afternoon, Norma came by with a bowl of potato salad, the way she did every second Wednesday. She set it down on the counter and took one look at Edith's face. Who messed with what now? She asked flatly. Edith handed her the notice. Norma put on her reading glasses. Co-owner? She squinted. Kyle's name's not supposed to be on this. I didn't sign a thing. Norma's mouth thinned. That's not easier. That's theft and paperwork. They sat in the sunroom while the ice melted in their tea glasses. Edith pulled out her purse and laid it on the wicker table between them. From its depths, she drew out a thin, unused manila folder. On the label, she printed one word: Vanessa. She slid the tax notice inside. Norma watched with quiet satisfaction. So, the file begins. Edith nodded. She wants my house. Let's see how she likes chasing shadows. Later that week, the mail arrived bundled in rubber band and sunlight. Edith sorted it at the kitchen counter, her old letter opener sliding under each flap with the precision of a surgeon. A folded letter, not from any bank or subscription, caught her eye. Its return address from the recorder's office. She read it standing up. This letter is to confirm that your recent deed transfer request is currently under review. Your property, listed at address, is undergoing co-ownership validation as filed by Kyle A. Miller. The words blurred at the edges, but Edith steadied her breath. They'd filed a second attempt, a fraudulent one. She walked to the hall closet, reached for her purse, and unzipped it like a ritual. The letter joined the tax notice in the Vanessa folder, which was already growing thicker than she'd hoped. She reached for her phone and opened her contacts. Howard Kemp, she whispered. Real estate law. Her thumb hovered over the call button. Click. Edith sat at the kitchen table, purse beside her, fingers pressed into the edge of the county envelope. She'd already read the letter twice that morning, but she unfolded it again. Slow, steady, just to be sure she hadn't misunderstood. Pending transfer of partial property ownership is under administrative review. Her name, her address, her son's name listed underneath as a prospective co-owner, and yet Her signature was nowhere on the form. The legalese crackled louder than the ticking wall clock. Edith's breath stayed calm, but her chest burned with a mix of insult and disbelief. She slipped on her glasses and scanned it one more time, eyes trained for fine print. She wasn't losing her house. Not to Vanessa. Not like this. The letter slid back into her purse, joining the copy of the tax notice she'd tucked there days earlier. She didn't need more confirmation. What she needed now was a move. Behind her, Clara stepped into the room, her eyes puffy from sleep. "You're up early again." "I've been up since men wore fedoras to breakfast," Edith said, not turning from the table. Clara walked over and leaned against the chair. "Was that the letter?" "It is." Edith finally met her gaze. "And if I didn't carry this purse, I might have missed it." Clara frowned. "I'm sorry. I heard Mom telling Dad the house was already half his. I thought she meant emotionally." "I didn't know she meant legally." Edith let out a soft scoff. "There's no emotion in theft. Only paperwork." She clicked open the manila file folder labeled House and slid in the letter, then sealed it shut. A new label joined it, handwritten in her neat cursive. "Vanessa, active fraud." Clara looked uneasy. "Can we even fight this?" "I'm not fighting," Edith replied. "I'm documenting." She stood and walked across the kitchen to the hallway phone nook, flipping through the dusty address book until her finger landed on a name. Howard Kemp, real estate attorney. A name she hadn't dialed since her husband passed, but one that had stayed in ink for a reason. She picked up the receiver, punched in the number, and waited. A clipped voice answered. "Kemp Legal. This is Janice Edith Miller calling. I need to schedule an appointment with Mr. Kemp about a fraudulent property filing. I have the documents." Pause. Then, "He's available tomorrow morning at 10:30. "I'll be there," Edith said. When she hung up, Clara raised a brow. "That fast?" "Speed's only a weapon when it's on your side," Edith said. She placed the folder back in her purse and zipped it closed. "And I've wasted enough time letting that woman think I don't read my own mail." The following day, Vanessa held court at a Sunday brunch downtown. Loud laughter spilling from the patio where she sat with two friends dressed in designer athleisure. A bottle of Prosecco chilled in a silver bucket beside her as she waved her flute in the air. "She has no clue," Vanessa said, biting into a fruit tart. "Kyle filed the transfer 2 weeks ago. She probably thinks title means something you get from the library." Her friends laughed, one of them slapping the table. "Besides," Vanessa added with a smirk, "once the house is in our name, I'm gutting that kitchen." It smells like a time capsule. At a table nearby, Clara sat with a book she wasn't reading. Her phone rested on her lap, recording every word. When Vanessa leaned closer and said, "We'll flip it the second she's gone," Clara calmly stopped the recording and slid the phone back into her tote. She didn't need to tell her grandmother a thing, because Edith Miller already knew, and she was already moving. The air inside Kemp Legal was cool, almost cold, the kind of sterile chill that smelled faintly of old carpet cleaner and sharper minds. Edith sat upright in the leather chair across from Howard Kemp's desk, her purse balanced squarely on her lap. She waited until he finished typing on his computer. No rush. That's what people like Vanessa never understood. Some things were best when they weren't rushed. Howard finally looked up. 60-something, sleeves rolled up to the elbows, glasses resting low on his nose, eyes sharp beneath his gray brows. "Mrs. Miller," he said, "you mentioned something about a forged deed transfer?" Edith gave a single nod, then unzipped her purse. Out came the labeled folders, one by one, each tab marked clearly in her tidy hand. Tax notice, county letter, house title, original copy, and finally, Vanessa, active fraud. She slid them across the desk without fanfare. No dramatic speeches, just proof. Howard flipped open the first one, then the next. His brows twitched, and he gave a soft whistle. "You weren't kidding," he murmured. "This is cleaner than most case files I get from full investigations. You've basically done my job for me." "I was a secretary for 38 years, Edith said simply. "I filed smarter than my boss." Howard grunted with a note of approval. He turned to his desktop scanner and began feeding the pages in. Let me guess. Your son signed a transfer authorization without your consent? She folded her hands. He submitted it. Vanessa forged my signature. Howard nodded as he clicked through county records on his screen. And if it hadn't been flagged for inconsistency, it might have gone through. Exactly. Edith's voice was crisp but steady. A soft knock came at the door. Clara poked her head in. Sorry, she said I could come back. Howard looked up. You must be the granddaughter. I am. Clara stepped inside, clutching her sketchbook like a shield. I wanted to say I'll testify. If it goes to court. My mom, Vanessa, she's been planning this for a while. I've heard things, I have recordings. Edith gave her a nod of approval that said more than thank you. Howard raised a brow. Recordings? You have them with you? Clara nodded and handed over her phone. Everything's time-stamped. He plugged it into his computer. As Vanessa's voice filled the room, bragging about flipping the house, laughing about Edith's ignorance, Howard's expression darkened. Well, he muttered, pulling out a legal form from a drawer, that seals it. We're filing for an injunction, fraudulent conveyance attempt, elder exploitation, and forgery. The trifecta. Edith didn't flinch. I want this documented thoroughly. You came to the right office, he said. But just to be clear, this could strain things with your son. Edith's lips thinned. If Kyle wants to tether himself to a sinking ship, I won't throw him a rope. At that moment, the door opened again. Norma stepped in like she owned the place, arms crossed, hair pulled into its usual no-nonsense bun. He treating you right? She asked Edith, then gave Howard a pointed look. No offense. Howard blinked. None taken. I told her, Norma said, setting a hand on Edith's shoulder. Don't just defend your home. Attack their nerve. Howard chuckled, stamping a file. That we can do. The printer came alive, spitting out the legal notice. Bold header, thick border, sharp ink. Howard folded it carefully. This goes out by courier this afternoon. Kyle Miller will be officially served by 9 a.m. tomorrow. Edith's fingers brushed the edge of her purse. Good, Howard looked at her. You sure you're ready for the fallout? Edith met his gaze evenly. Vanessa thought this purse held mints and coupons. But today, it carries the first nail in her coffin. Just before sunset, Kyle opened the door of their suburban split-level home to find a uniformed courier holding a stiff brown envelope. Vanessa leaned over the back of the couch, wineglass in hand. What is it? Kyle tore the seal, pulled the document halfway out, and paled. Vanessa snatched it from his hands. Her laugh died in her throat. Edith sat at Howard Kemp's mahogany desk, her pen hovering over the last page. The will, 3 copies, thick with ironclad clauses, waited under her fingertips like silent sentinels. Her purse, that so-called junk bag Vanessa had laughed at, now sat upright beside her, holding more legacy than a bank vault. The pen clicked softly as she uncapped it. I want to be very clear, Edith said, not looking up. Kyle and Vanessa are removed completely. Not a dollar, not a dish. Howard nodded without flinching. This version ensures they're legally disinherited. The no contest clause means if they even try to challenge it, they get nothing. Clara, on the other hand, Edith smiled for the first time that morning. My granddaughter gets the house, but not all at once. I want her to have it at 25, if she stays in school, stays clean, and stays kind. I drafted it exactly that way, Howard said. And the donation? To the shelter, Edith confirmed. The one off Spring Street. They helped me once, when Kyle was small and his father had left a mess. Howard's eyes softened. You remember that even now? You don't forget who helps you up when others step over you. The door creaked open behind her. Clara walked in, her camera slung around her shoulder, paint under her fingernails, a look of quiet pride on her face. You really mean it? She asked. Me? Edith turned to face her. You've already earned it. Clara blinked quickly, brushing away a tear before it had the chance to fall. Howard slid. the papers forward, tapping the signature lines. Let's make this official. Edith signed with the same crisp flourish she'd once used to countersign corporate memos and raise a child alone. Ink didn't shake in her hand. It never had. Howard signed as witness, then turned to Clara. You'll get everything at 25, Edith repeated. And until then, it's locked. Protected. That way no one can sneak a key into your future, Clara's voice cracked. You really trust me that much? I don't trust you, Edith said, slipping the signed will into a plastic sleeve and placing it into her purse. I believe in you. From the other chair, Norma let out a whistle. Well, damn, I wish you'd adopt me. Everyone laughed, except Edith, who simply clicked her pen shut and closed her purse. She'll never touch a brick of this house, she said. And she'll never laugh at this bag again. Howard stood. Let me file this today. Copies go to probate records, and one's sealed here at the firm. But the original? He nodded toward the purse. That's yours. Edith patted the clasp with care, as though tucking in a child. Right where it belongs. That afternoon, as the sun dulled behind storm-gray clouds, Vanessa sat in the living room, surrounded by unopened Amazon boxes, 2 wine glasses, and the permanent sneer she called a smile. Kyle paced in the hallway, papers still unread in his hand. She can't just cut us out, Vanessa snapped. We're her family. Kyle didn't reply. She's slipping, she continued. Old women with purses like that, who knows what kind of nonsense they scribble into documents. We should have taken control months ago, Kyle hesitated. She looked steady. At the lawyer's office, Vanessa rolled her eyes. Steady doesn't mean sane. That woman still uses a flip phone. She stood suddenly, knocking over one of the wine glasses. Red liquid bled across the rug, like spilled accusation. I'm done waiting for her to die comfortably in that house while we play polite. She wants war? Fine. She grabbed her tablet and began typing furiously. Kyle watched her with a slack-jawed weariness that had become his resting expression. What are you doing? He asked. Filing for emergency guardianship, Vanessa snapped. We tell the court she's a danger to herself. Once I'm guardian, that house is as good as ours, she hit submit with a single jab of her finger. The envelope was cream-colored, legal-sized, and thick. Kyle dropped it off like it was nothing, just another errand from his wife's to-do list. But Edith knew the weight of bad intentions. They rarely came in black and white, but this one did. Her hands were steady as she sliced it open at the kitchen counter. Inside, emergency petition for guardianship. Filed by Vanessa L. Miller. Basis, concerns regarding Ms. Edith M. Miller's cognitive and financial capacity. Edith didn't blink. Instead, she folded the papers in half, slid them neatly into her purse, and reached for the phone. Howard, she said calmly when he picked up. Vanessa just tried to steal my mind. 2 days later, Edith sat in the waiting room of the physician's office the court had assigned. The air smelled of rubbing alcohol and faded plastic. Across from her, Clara fidgeted with her phone, visibly nervous. You don't have to be here, Edith said. Yes, I do. Clara looked up, voice quiet but firm. She's trying to erase you. I won't let her. The door opened. Miss Miller? Edith stood, spine straight, chin high. That's me. The cognitive evaluation was lengthy. Reflex tests, memory recall, financial logic, even ethics scenarios. Edith answered each one with a dry confidence sharpened by years of secretarial work and single motherhood. When the doctor asked her to spell world backwards, she did it twice, just to be clear. When asked who the current governor was, she corrected the examiner's mispronounced name. By the end of the session, the doctor leaned back, visibly impressed. I've administered over 300 of these, he said, and that was the most concise mental performance I've seen all year. Thank you, Edith replied, retrieving her purse with calm finality. My memory's not what it was in 1983, but I still remember how betrayal smells. Meanwhile, Clara stood in the hallway with her phone recording behind her sketchbook. Just around the corner, Vanessa was whispering to Kyle in a venom-laced hiss. All you have to do is say she gets confused, she said. A little white lie. The court won't check. Kyle's voice was muffled and reluctant. I don't know, Ness. She seemed sharp. You want to wait 10 years for that house? Vanessa snapped. Say what you need to say. Clara kept recording. That evening, Edith replayed the footage on Clara's phone. She said nothing as she watched Vanessa manipulate her son like a cheap puppet. But her silence crackled with electricity. Norma sat beside her on the couch, listening. When the clip ended, she looked over, a wicked grin curling. That tape is gold, Norma said. Gold dipped in truth. Edith looked at her, expression unreadable. Then let's melt it down into something useful. Howard did exactly that. He submitted the video as counter-evidence with a motion to dismiss the guardianship attempt. He attached the evaluation report, excellent cognitive function. No indicators of impairment. Then he walked the documents himself to the court clerk. They tried to declare you incapable, he said to Edith. You just outscored their IQs combined. She didn't smile. She was past smiling. She was building something stronger now. Momentum. 3 days later, the judge reviewed the case. The courtroom was silent as the video played. Vanessa looked pale, lips twitching. Kyle slouched so far into his seat he might have vanished. When the judge read the physician's report aloud, Vanessa crossed her arms and rolled her eyes. I don't see any evidence supporting your claim, the judge said sharply. Your own daughter-in-law appears to be the one inappropriately influencing others. Vanessa's mouth opened, then shut again. The gavel struck. Petition denied. Permanently. Miss Miller remains her own guardian. Clara reached under the table and squeezed Edith's hand. Edith didn't squeeze back, but she didn't let go either. Outside, the clouds were low and gray. Vanessa stormed down the courthouse steps, stilettos clacking against the stone like gunshots. She yanked Kyle by the sleeve. She rigged it, she spat. That test was rigged. That doctor was probably on her side. Kyle didn't answer. He just kept walking. Vanessa pulled out her phone and typed furiously. If she wants war, she muttered, she'll get one. Edith reached for a bundle of celery at the local Kroger, when a voice behind her said softly, Poor thing. Did you hear? She's slipping. Thinks people are stealing from her. She paused, hands still on the green stalks. The chill from the produce mist suddenly felt colder than usual. By the time she reached the checkout lane, she'd caught 2 more stares, both from women she knew by name, neighbors who used to wave. One offered a brittle smile and turned quickly away. At home, she sat on her porch swing, the sun warm against her knees, and watched the mailman walk past without a glance. Usually, he'd wave. Today, he just kept his head down. Inside the house, Clara stood over a simmering pot of tomato soup, her back to the door. She didn't need to turn around. You heard it too, didn't you? Edith asked. Clara stirred. Mrs. Barnes asked me if I thought you remembered my name. Edith's eyes narrowed, jaw tight. Clara turned, setting the spoon down. She said Vanessa told her you called a can opener the TV remote. Edith let out a dry breath. That was a joke. I made it. At dinner, Clara stepped closer. I know. But she's twisting it the next day. A friend from church, a woman Edith once comforted during her husband's chemo, texted. Vanessa says you're not doing well. Anything I can bring by? That was the tipping point. Edith walked to her hall closet, pulled out a beige accordion folder, and labeled a new tab in clean block letters. Defamation, VM. Then she called Howard. She's poisoning the air I breathe, Edith said flatly. I want it documented. Howard didn't miss a beat. You still have the petition denial and the doctor's report? In my purse. Good. We'll add a pre-litigation letter and prep a counter. Later that afternoon, Norma marched across the lawn in slippers and a jacket that didn't match. She slammed a copy of the community newsletter on Edith's patio. Table. You see this? She barked. The community rep mentioned you in his column. Said you were adjusting to new life stages. That's code. Edith flipped through the newsletter. Vanessa's hands are all over this. Norma stabbed a finger at the article. Fight gossip with paper. Make your truth louder. That night, Clara sat with Edith at the kitchen table, her voice low. I looked up APS, she said, sliding over a printed form. You can file a complaint preemptively. Show them what she's doing, that you're lucid, prepared, and being targeted. Edith's pen was already in her hand. Then let's give them the truth. In ink, she filled out every line carefully, her handwriting neat and deliberate, the way she'd once addressed company envelopes in the 70s. By the time Howard submitted the defamation counter to Vanessa's email address, Edith had a manila envelope filled with printed texts, screenshots, and Clara's recording from the hallway. But humiliation still lingered like a film on her skin. It clung when she shopped, when she waved at neighbors, when her name came up in conversations she wasn't invited into. She didn't cry, but she did clean, furiously. The kitchen gleamed, the grout re-whitened, the silver polished until her reflection looked back like armor. Then, on a Thursday morning, she went out to fetch her mail. The metal flap of the mailbox was bent outward, pried open like a peeled can. The envelopes inside were scattered, some soggy from dew, others torn at the edges. One bank statement was missing. Her breath caught. She looked up and down the street. No one was outside. She picked up the mail with stiff fingers, slid it back into her purse, and stood there, quiet and burning. Across the lawn, Norma's front door creaked open. "Edith," she called out. "Something wrong?" Edith didn't answer. She just walked inside, locked the door behind her, and zipped her purse closed, like sealing a vault. The first thing she noticed wasn't the flap, though it was still pried open like a mouth mid-lie. It was the envelope that wasn't there. Edith held the remaining pieces of mail in her hand, the electric bill, a catalog she'd never subscribed to, a notice from her pharmacy, but her monthly bank statement from Fifth Savings, gone. Her fingers curled around the envelopes like fists. She walked straight back into the house, shut the front door with a controlled click, and set the mail on the kitchen counter. Then she reached for her notebook, opened to the tab marked Mail Irregularities, and wrote, May 14th, statement missing, box pried, suspect theft. Her handwriting was tight, straight, no tremor. Then she picked up the phone and called the USPS Inspector General's hotline. 2 days later, an officer in a Navy windbreaker and badge on a chain stood on her porch. His name was Agent Dillard. He took photos of the mailbox, collected her written statement, and nodded through her calm retelling. "We've seen this before," he said. "Usually family. Usually tied to financial access." "I figured," Edith replied. "That's why I keep everything in here." She tapped the side of her leather purse. His brow arched. "You've already documented this?" She opened her purse and handed over photocopies of missing statements, dates, her handwritten logs. He whistled under his breath. "Miss Miller, if every complainant came this prepared, we'd be out of work." "I don't wait to be sorry," she said. "I stay ready." That evening, Clara returned home with paint smudges on her jeans and earbuds dangling around her neck. Her steps were slow, heavy with unease. She didn't even greet Edith before stepping into the living room. "You're not going to like what I saw," she said. Edith looked up from her chair. "Try me." Clara pulled out her phone, tapped a video. Vanessa. In the hallway. The camera was angled low but clear. Vanessa's voice, sharp and snappy. "She leaves it everywhere. Like it's just decoration." And then came the image. Vanessa unzipping Edith's purse. Her fingers rifling quickly through papers and folders like a thief flipping through cash. "What was she looking for?" Edith asked. "Your bank papers. I caught her on the way out. She said she was just checking on something." Edith took a slow breath, stood up, walked to her purse on the dining table, and zipped it shut with a deliberate tug. "Not this time," she said. The next morning, Norma showed up with a mug of coffee in one hand and her phone in the other. "You're trending," she said flatly, scrolling through the local neighborhood app. "Rumors are flying." "Let me guess," Edith said. "Vanessa again?" "She told someone at Pilates you were paranoid. Called you a hoarder. Said Kyle had to keep tabs on you." Edith didn't flinch. Then let's give her something to tab. She picked up her phone and dialed Howard. By the end of the week, Edith's folder of documentation had grown by 2 inches. Between the video Clara captured, the mail theft report, the bank's confirmation of attempted online access, and Edith's own timeline of events, Howard looked stunned when she laid it all across his desk. "This is the kind of file I build for trial," he muttered, sifting through the evidence. "She's not just digging her grave, she's installing plumbing." "I'm ready for her next move," Edith said. "And the one after that." Howard nodded. "Good, because now it's our move." The call came the next morning. Edith stood by her kitchen window, trimming basil, when her landline rang. "Miss Miller?" It was Agent Dillard. "We finished our initial investigation. Between your neighbor's video, your documents, and what your granddaughter recorded, we've looped in the sheriff's department." Edith pressed the speaker button and kept trimming leaves. "We're issuing a summons. She'll be served before noon." Edith didn't say a word, just smiled, slow and satisfied. At exactly 11:47 a.m., a sheriff's cruiser rolled up in front of Kyle and Vanessa's house. Clara watched from the upstairs window as Vanessa opened the door in full makeup and a silk robe. The deputy handed her a thick envelope. Vanessa's jaw dropped, her lips moved, but no sound escaped. She turned sharply, slammed the door. Clara walked down the stairs. "She's been served," she said. Edith didn't even look up from her crossword. "About time," she said. The courthouse walls felt colder than Edith expected. They weren't built for comfort, just decisions. She adjusted the strap of her purse, the leather worn smooth from decades of use. Inside, every paper sat where it belonged. Labeled, dated, weaponized. Across the courtroom, Vanessa twirled her sunglasses between her fingers like a baton. She looked like she was attending a brunch, not a legal hearing. Kyle sat beside her, pale and silent, like a man in the wrong place who refused to leave it. Edith didn't offer them a glance. She walked past and sat beside Howard Kemp at the plaintiff's table, unzipping her purse with methodical precision. From it, she pulled a tabbed binder, organized so tightly it could pass military inspection. Howard nodded with quiet approval. "Today," he murmured, "we're not just holding them accountable. We're closing the door they tried to pick." The judge, Honorable Maria Ramirez, entered with a stack of case files in hand and a stare that could cauterize. "Court is now in session." Howard rose. "Your Honor, this is a case of financial manipulation and attempted elder exploitation. My client, Edith Miller, has provided extensive documentation." He paused, tapping the binder, showing illegal deed transfer attempts, bank fraud, and coercive behavior from the defendants, Vanessa and Kyle Miller. Vanessa let out a tiny laugh. "Coercive? Please. We were trying to help her." Ramirez didn't blink. "You'll have your turn, miss." Miller set Howard opened the binder. Each page snapped crisply as he flipped through them. Mail theft reports, forged deed comparisons, notarized letters, witness statements. Claire's recording of Vanessa mocking her grandmother played next. Even over courtroom speakers, Vanessa's voice rang clear, cruel, smug, and unmistakable. Then came Clara, steady as a lighthouse, in her soft blue blouse and steady voice. "She went through my grandma's purse while she was in the kitchen. Said she deserved the house because old people don't use square footage." Gasps echoed from the gallery. Kyle lowered his head. Vanessa's mouth pinched, but she stayed seated. Edith sat quietly the entire time, fingers interlaced, purse resting like a sentry in her lap. Only her eyes moved, locked on the judge, unflinching. And then Vanessa exploded. "She's nothing without that damn purse," she snapped, rising from her seat. "You think she's so organized? She's a hoarder with lipstick and receipts. She probably staged all this just to play victim." The judge banged her gavel twice. "Enough. Sit down, or I'll have you removed." Howard didn't even turn. "If the court needed proof of her entitlement, I believe we just heard it." Ramirez leaned back, scanning the binder again. Miss Miller, she said, looking at Edith. Have you added anything further to the record? Edith stood, lifted her purse, and stepped forward with a slow grace that silenced even Vanessa. She handed the judge a sealed folder, updated estate documents, trust amendments. No one here will touch a single doorknob of my house again. The judge opened the folder, scanned the top page, and nodded once. All properly notarized and filed. That's rare. She glanced back at the defense, voice flattening like a slammed drawer. The evidence presented is overwhelming. This court is ordering a formal restitution hearing to evaluate financial damages. Furthermore, guardianship is denied permanently, and I am referring this case for review of potential criminal fraud. Vanessa stared, blinking like the words hadn't reached her. Clara exhaled beside Edith and whispered, "You brought everything they didn't expect." Edith gave a faint smile. That purse always had more than receipts. As they stood to leave, the courtroom hushed. Edith didn't rush. She slid the binder back into her purse, zipped it closed, and tucked it under her arm. Each step she took echoed, steady, unafraid, final. And as they exited the courthouse into the thick Columbus air, Vanessa stood frozen behind the glass doors, watching Edith walk away, just as the clerk leaned toward her and said, "You've got a restitution hearing next week. Better bring more than attitude." The courtroom lights hummed faintly, casting a dull sheen across the polished oak bench. Edith adjusted the hem of her cardigan and clutched her purse in her lap. The leather felt warm against her fingers, like it had absorbed her steadiness. Judge Ramirez cleared her throat and began. "We are here today to determine financial restitution in the matter of Edith Miller versus Kyle and Vanessa Miller." Howard Kemp rose smoothly beside her, his voice even but edged. "Your Honor, we've submitted records of unauthorized withdrawals, forged deed filings, and financial losses caused by property interference. My client isn't seeking revenge. She's seeking repair." Across the room, Vanessa sat with arms crossed so tightly, her fake nails dug into her palms. Kyle looked like a ghost wearing his own skin, sunken, silent, sweating. His tie was crooked, his collar damp. "Do the defendants have anything to add before I rule?" Judge Ramirez asked. Vanessa stood with a scoff. "She's 74. We were protecting her assets. That house would have ended up in probate chaos. The judge cut her off with a raised hand. "Miss Miller, we already ruled against guardianship. Sit down." Howard didn't bother to look at her. Instead, he handed the judge a final page. "One last item, Your Honor. A breakdown of repair costs. Property taxes covered personally by Ms. Edith Miller during the time the deed was improperly filed." The judge scanned the numbers, her expression unreadable. Silence draped over the courtroom like heavy fabric. Then her gavel struck once. "This court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Kyle and Vanessa Miller are hereby ordered to pay restitution totaling $47,326.82. That includes full reimbursement of fraudulent transfers, legal expenses, and misuse of property title." Kyle exhaled like someone had punched the air out of him. Vanessa muttered something under her breath, too low to catch, but her jaw tightened as though it might snap. "Furthermore," the judge continued, "the property deed is to be restored solely in Edith Miller's name, effective immediately. All guardianship motions are permanently denied. Any future attempts will be considered harassment." Edith closed her eyes for one breath, just one. When she opened them again, the weight in her chest had shifted, not vanished, but loosened, like a house settling on a foundation finally made solid. Clara reached across the table, wrapping both arms around her. "Grandma, you won." Really won. Edith didn't cry. She didn't need to. Her smile said what her silence always had. That strength never needed to raise its voice. Norma met her in the hallway afterward with a wink and a soft pat on the arm. "That's a win in black and white, Edith." Edith glanced at the fresh copy of the ruling Howard tucked into her purse. "And in ink," she replied. "The kind that doesn't smudge." Vanessa stormed past them toward the elevator, heels stabbing the tile like war drums. Kyle shuffled behind, head down. No apology, not even a backward glance. "You know this isn't over," Norma muttered. "It's over when she stops needing my name to get what she wants," Edith said calmly. "And when she realizes it won't work anymore." Back home, Clara helped her place the deed in the file cabinet, behind 2 locks and a smile of quiet satisfaction. The house smelled of fresh lemons and old books. Peace had a scent, and Edith had missed it. That night she sat in her living room with her purse by her side, a cup of chamomile cooling beside her chair. She didn't need to unpack the papers. She knew exactly what was inside. The documents weren't trophies. They were armor. And just as she reached to switch off the lamp, her phone buzzed with a notification. 1 line. "Vanessa Miller has filed an appeal." The appellate courtroom was smaller than the last. Less fanfare, more formality. No jury, no gallery murmurs. Just Edith at the polished wood table beside Howard, her purse resting atop her lap like a co-conspirator. Vanessa sat across the aisle, lips lacquered in crimson and eyes defiant. Her new attorney, a younger man with slicked back hair and a clipboard he barely glanced at, leaned over and whispered something. She didn't nod. She didn't blink. She stared straight at Edith as if daring her to flinch. Edith didn't flinch. She reached into her purse with slow precision and pulled out a neatly labeled folder. Appeal response. Every page tabbed. Every tab highlighted. The judge entered briskly. Robes swishing, he adjusted his glasses and looked over the case brief with the kind of weary detachment that came from years of watching families implode. "Case number AC 8721, he began. "Appellant Vanessa Miller, represented by counsel, requesting appeal of restitution and property ruling. Defense?" Howard stood. "Your Honor, we submit this is not an appeal rooted in legal merit, but in frustration. The original evidence still stands, and we've brought further comparative signatures to underscore the fraudulent nature of the transfer attempt." He slid the originals and the forgeries across the bench in plastic sleeves. The judge didn't need a magnifying glass. Even from the bench, the difference was glaring. Edith's handwriting, curled, steady, tight, and the other, wide and crooked with obvious hesitation. Howard added, "All documents were filed under my client's name without consent. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's theft cloaked in entitlement." Vanessa's lawyer cleared his throat. "We maintain that the filings were a family miscommunication." The judge lifted a hand, palm out. "Mr. Epstein, if your client wishes to challenge handwriting analysis, she'll need certified rebuttal documents. None are in this file." The lawyer hesitated. Vanessa sat back, folding her arms like a closing gate. Edith felt a pulse of warmth in her chest. Not smugness, just certainty. Judge Ramirez leaned forward. "This court finds no basis to overturn the lower court's ruling. The appeal is dismissed. All prior orders remain." The gavel struck once, clean and final. Vanessa shot up from her chair, heels clicking like gunshots on marble. "You're all just eating out of her wrinkled hand." The bailiff turned her way, but the judge simply pointed to the exit. "This hearing is over, miss." Miller Vanessa stormed out, her lawyer chasing behind like a winded intern. The heavy double doors clanged shut, echoing like the end of something long overdue. Howard glanced at Edith with a small, approving nod. "It's done." Edith smoothed the flap of her purse and let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "Her greed's exhausted," she murmured, her voice low but edged with something stronger than relief. "Resolve." Clara looped her arm through her grandmother's as they walked out into the crisp Ohio air. "But your purse," she said with a grin. "That thing's endless," Edith chuckled. "Endless patience. Endless paper. Endless proof." They passed the courthouse steps slowly. The late afternoon sun filtered through the trees, casting warm light over the concrete. For a moment, Edith allowed herself to pause and just feel it. The calm after a long, bitter storm. No more courtrooms. No more accusations. No more venom disguised as concern. As they reached the parking lot, Howard stopped beside her and handed over a sealed folder. All that's left is the final trust signing. We've built it airtight, irrevocable. And Vanessa? She won't see a cent, Edith nodded, slipping the folder gently into her purse. The weight of it settled evenly, like it belonged there all along. Let's finish this, she said. The pen didn't tremble, not in Edith's hand. As Howard slid the final page of the trust packet toward her, the office fell into a kind of reverent hush. The room smelled faintly of cedarwood and paper ink, weighty, real. Edith pressed her signature onto the dotted line with the kind of care a person reserves for goodbyes, or beginnings. Across the table, Clara watched, eyes glassy but glowing. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Edith could feel her granddaughter's pride in the way she sat tall, in the way she smiled, full and quiet and knowing. Howard capped the pen, glanced at the notary seated beside him, and gave a nod. Witnessed, filed, irrevocable. His voice carried the finality of a sealed vault. No one touches this trust without Clara's consent, not even the courts. And certainly not Vanessa. Edith exhaled slowly, like shedding a decade in one breath. That's how it should be. Every asset in the deed, every cent, Howard continued, organizing the folders into a neat stack, goes into the trust effective immediately. Upon your passing, Clara receives full ownership of the house, provided she's 25. Until then, the estate funds cover maintenance and property tax. Your secondary beneficiary, the Columbus Women's Shelter, will receive 10%. Clara blinked. You're giving it to the shelter? Edith looked over with a soft smile. They help women leave cages. Seems only fair they benefit from the one I escaped. Norma, perched in the corner with her arms folded and legs crossed like a courtroom spectator, let out a low whistle. She can't even breathe on your house now, Edith chuckled. That's the point. Howard handed Edith the final copy of the trust packet, sealed in a navy blue folder with embossed lettering. She opened her purse, the same purse Vanessa once called a leather thrift bin, and slid it inside. It nestled among other documents, other proofs. For months she'd been carrying her defense. Now she carried her peace. Clara leaned over and whispered, "What do you think she'll do when she finds out?" Edith's smile didn't fade. She'll do what she always does. Flail, pretend, blame, but not touch a dime. The office was warm, sun filtering through slatted blinds, casting pale gold streaks across the floor. Outside, the traffic hummed low and constant. Inside, time slowed. The kind of stillness that comes after a battle, when the armor's off and the war is won. Norma stood, smoothing her blouse. You've outplayed her every move, every lie, every grab. She thought my purse was a vault she could crack, Edith said, rising carefully. But it was a wall. As they reached the door, Howard stopped her with one last piece of advice. Guard the trust copy. Keep it close, Edith tapped her purse. She'll have to pry it from my fingers. She meant it. That night, the porch light outside Edith's house flickered softly. The cicadas buzzed in the maple trees. Clara reheated leftovers while Edith sat at the table, her purse still resting in its usual place, beside her like a guardian. When the mail slot clinked open and a single envelope slid across the hardwood, Clara jumped slightly. Edith didn't move. She waited until Clara brought it over, plain white, addressed in all caps. The envelope still smelled of her perfume, that cloying, oversweet scent Vanessa always wore. Something like cherry blossoms dunked in rubbing alcohol, seeped from the paper as Edith held it in gloved fingers. She'd been expecting another attempt. This one came folded in cream stationery, the kind meant for weddings or grief. The irony wasn't lost on her. Clara stood nearby, watching. Want me to read it first? No, Edith said, her voice a thread of flint. She wrote it for me. Let's not spare her the dignity of being read. She unfolded the letter on the edge of her oak table, the one Vanessa once mocked as depressingly brown. Edith smoothed the page flat with both hands. I didn't mean for things to go this far. We're family. Family fights, but it forgives too. I was just trying to secure the future for everyone. You misunderstood me. I know I've made mistakes, but we all have. Kyle still wants to make things right. If you'd just sit down and talk like an adult, maybe we could fix this. I won't beg, but you owe me that much. It was signed in large loops, Vanessa, with a postscript. I could have taken everything. I didn't. Edith's lip curled into something cold and amused. She thinks this is restraint. Clara leaned closer. That wasn't an apology. That was a threat wearing lipstick outside. Dusk had turned the windows a soft lavender. The kitchen clock ticked above the stove. Steady and unbothered, Edith refolded the letter and rose. Without a word, she walked to the living room and knelt by the hearth. The fireplace still held last week's ash. Old newsprint, blackened logs, a few stubborn embers. Edith struck a match. The flame flickered, paused, then caught. She held the letter above the glow, and the fire kissed the paper without hesitation. The edges curled first, brown to black, then vanished into ember. The ink blistered and vanished. Vanessa's name flared briefly before dissolving entirely. Clara crouched beside her. She doesn't get the last word. No, came a voice behind them, steady and fierce. Norma. You do. Edith didn't answer. She only watched until the last of the page was gone. No trace, no smoke too thick to breathe. Then she dusted her hands off, as if she'd just cleared crumbs from a counter. Howard arrived the next morning, portfolio in hand. His tie was askew, and his coat had the sharp scent of August wool. He sat at her kitchen table, flipped through the trust file once more, and gave the only nod that mattered. Everything's sealed, he said. Filed, verified, and protected. She can't undo a word of it. He pulled out a red stamp, inked it, and pressed it to the final page. Trust finalized. Clara clapped softly. Norma gave an approving hum. Edith? She said nothing, but her hand moved toward her purse and gently slid the updated copy inside. Next to the deed, the birth certificates, the photos, the notarized evidence. What Vanessa once mocked as useless mints and coupons now held a fortified archive. My purse holds peace now, Edith said. And it did. Not vengeance, not spite. Peace. But a peace she built plank by plank, through fire, ink, and resolve. That afternoon, while watering her dahlias, Norma came rushing down the front walk, waving a folded newspaper. You made page 3, she called. Edith took the paper, hands still faintly damp from the hose. The headline stared back. Widow defends home from family exploitation. Legal victory sends strong message. Beneath it, a photo of Edith at the courthouse, purse on her lap, eyes sharp. Clara peeked over her shoulder. Oh, wow. They actually quoted Howard. Edith read aloud. She came prepared. The purse wasn't for show. It was her weapon, Norma chuckled. Damn right. Edith folded the paper carefully and slid it under her arm. The sky above had gone blue and hard, the way it only did in late summer. No storms. Not anymore. But even as she turned toward the porch, she caught sight of something across the street. A car, silver, parked just a little too long at the curb. Inside, Vanessa, behind the wheel. Sunglasses on, watching. Edith didn't flinch. She walked inside, shut the door gently, and slid the lock into place. They used to glance past her, neighbors on walks, joggers, the mailman with earbuds in. But that morning, as Edith Miller stepped out to check her mailbox, every head turned. Edith, called Mrs. Fenley from across the street, holding up the Columbus Dispatch like it was a trophy. Saw the article. Good for you. Edith gave a polite nod, tucking a curl of silver hair behind her ear as if brushing away attention. She opened her mailbox, intact now, no scratches, no pry marks, and pulled out only junk mail and a glossy real estate flyer. It fluttered into the recycling bin without a second glance. By noon, 3 neighbors had come by with pound cakes and well wishes. Mrs. Patel even brought a balloon. The quote from Howard had made the rounds quickly. This was not a case of frailty. This was a case of foresight. The photo beneath it captured Edith perfectly, shoulders squared, purse at her side, eyes clear and unreadable. Vanessa, on the other hand, had gone conspicuously silent. Her Instagram was wiped. Her weekly shopping hauls, gone. Even her Range Rover hadn't left the driveway in 2 days. Word on the street was she'd tried to spin the article as tabloid trash, but no one was buying it. Kyle's absence, however, spoke louder than any headline. Edith had found his keys on the hallway table 2 mornings ago, just sitting there on a worn napkin. No note, no call, just gone. Clara confirmed it. He'd packed a bag and moved into a corporate apartment downtown. Not a word since. Norma came by with lemon cookies and a smirk sharp enough to cut glass. Well, your house survived the storm. Her marriage didn't. Edith took a cookie and didn't gloat. She simply said, things fall apart when they're built on entitlement. Clara joined them in the kitchen, the air thick with the warm sugar of the oven. She was humming, actually humming, as she set a package on the table. What's this? Edith asked. Clara grinned. A thank you. For being the kind of grandmother who doesn't just survive, but rises. Edith hesitated. The box was wrapped in marbled gray paper, a matching bow tied with careful hands. Inside, nestled in navy velvet, lay a new purse. It was leather, rich, supple, and engraved in gold just below the clasp. E.M. Steel and Silk. For a long moment, Edith said nothing. Her hands trembled as she traced the letters, then clasped the purse gently like a fragile truth she'd waited decades to be seen. It's beautiful, she whispered. Clara leaned in, voice soft. You don't have to carry the old one anymore. But I know you'll keep it anyway. I will, Edith said. It's history. This? She held up the new purse. This is legacy, Norma dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Damn, you two could teach master classes in dignity. They all laughed then, real, full laughter that filled the house the way summer light poured through the curtains. No tension, no shadows, just peace earned. Later, Clara scrolled through the article again, reading the comments aloud as Edith sorted paperwork into her new purse. She's my hero. Made me cry. Reminds me of my grandma. Wish she was here. She looked up. You've got people rooting for you from states away. Edith smiled, not for the fame but for the silence, the absence of Vanessa's noise, the relief of no more battles in the shadows. You know, she said, sipping her tea. They used to say I had nothing. Norma raised a brow. And what do you say now? Edith looked around, Clara beaming. Sunlight stretching across her dining room table, her home still hers, and her legacy, untouched, unshaken. I say I have everything, she said. The doorbell rang just as Clara placed the final document into the new purse. Clara moved to answer it, but Edith lifted a hand. No, I'll get this one, she said, rising. Her steps were slow but sure, purse on her arm, name in the paper, deed in her possession. And when she opened the door, she found no drama, just a delivery man holding a clipboard, a package marked private legal delivery, and a faint smirk as he said, Looks like you're still making waves, ma'am. Edith signed without asking, but even as she closed the door, her pulse ticked up. Not fear, just a question. Because the return address? It had Vanessa's name on it. The morning was cool, the kind that whispered autumn through open windows and coaxed memories from old wood. Sunlight warmed the kitchen tile as Edith stood at the counter, her hands slow, deliberate. She unlatched the box Clara had wrapped just days ago, the new purse gleaming in soft leather, her initials stitched in gold thread. E.M. Steel and Silk. The name fit better now than ever. Carefully, Edith opened the latch and slid the final copy of the irrevocable trust inside. The paper made the faintest shh sound as it slipped into the interior pocket. She paused, fingers brushing its edge, heart steady, Behind her, Clara sat cross-legged on the living room rug, flipping through an old scrapbook. "All done?" she asked, looking up with a smile that still carried a touch of childhood. Edith nodded, clicking the purse shut. "It's yours forever now." Clara stood and came to her side, eyes misting. "No, you're the one who gets forever. This house, this peace. It's all because you didn't give up outside." The leaves trembled in the breeze. The silence felt earned. Norma knocked once before letting herself in, holding a mug of coffee in one hand and a folded paper in the other. "You made the front page again, opinion column. They're calling it a masterclass in grace." Edith didn't reach for it. "Let them talk. They weren't there when she grabbed my purse like it was a joke." Norma smirked. "Well, who's laughing now?" Howard arrived just after noon, briefcase in hand, tie slightly askew. He looked around the kitchen like a general surveying the aftermath of battle. Everything sealed, no more loopholes, no more challenges. "Viking, Vanessa even breathes on your estate. We bury her in paperwork." "I'll bring the shovel," Norma muttered, sipping her coffee. Edith didn't laugh, but her smile was unmistakable. "Thank you, Howard, for believing me before anyone else did." Howard tapped the side of her purse. "It was all there. You were never a victim, just a woman who knew how to document her survival." She took that in with a quiet nod. The weight in her chest had lifted, not just from the end of a legal war, but from decades of being dismissed, underestimated, and ignored. Her hands moved to the old purse resting on the counter nearby, scuffed, faded, but still intact. She opened it one last time, retrieving the yellowed notepad, a stub of lipstick, and the first copy of the deed, the one that had traveled through courtrooms and conference rooms and betrayal alike. Clara offered a cloth-lined box. "We can keep it safe." Like a time capsule, Edith tucked the old purse inside, along with the original paperwork, then closed the lid. Let it rest. Outside, a car slowed in front of the house, not Vanessa's. This one lingered just long enough to read the house number before pulling away. Edith didn't flinch. She turned to Clara and Norma, her voice calm. "They'll never touch it," Howard gestured to the window. "And if they try, I'm still on retainer." The laugh that followed was deep and real, not spiteful, not bitter, just clean. Clara picked up her camera from the table. "I've been working on something." Edith raised an eyebrow. "Another documentary?" "No, just a video. Your story, your words, not theirs." She didn't need to ask why. The world would know exactly how it happened, from purse snatching to courtroom victories. Not from gossip, but from truth. Edith stepped into the living room, ran her hand along the oak trim of the fireplace, then sat in her favorite chair, the purse in her lap. She looked around at her home, books on the shelf, family photos returned to the mantel, Clara's laughter echoing from the hallway. Peace wasn't quiet. It was full. "My purse," she said softly, carried more than they knew. It carried my victory. And as she leaned back, the final words echoed not as bitterness, but as a promise carved in ink and will and law. "My daughter-in-law snatched my purse and laughed. 'What's even in here?' So I showed her the deed she'll never touch.